Most women don't realize when they've become more than a desire, when they've become a fixation lodged deep in a man's unconscious mind. It doesn't always begin with lust or longing. Sometimes it starts with a silence he can't explain. A moment when he looks at her, not just with his eyes, but with something beneath the surface, something ancient, something shadowed. His ego might dismiss it. His mind may rationalize it, but his spirit has already decided. He's addicted to her, though he won't say the words aloud. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection, but not the shallow projection of ordinary crushes or fleeting infatuation. No, this is the sacred projection of the anima, the inner feminine image buried within every man's psyche. When a woman matches the silhouette of his soul's craving, he doesn't just want her, he needs her. And not in the way society teaches men to need women. This is spiritual addiction, the kind that causes insomnia, restless thoughts, and fantasies he keeps locked away, even from himself. He won't always understand why her silence cuts him deeper than her words. He won't confess why her absence lingers longer than her presence. This is because his addiction is not to her body, but to the mystery she represents, to the emotional labyrinth he cannot solve, to the feeling that somehow she knows parts of him he has yet to meet. When Jung studied the male unconscious, he saw how men project the anima onto real women without realizing it. They believe they're falling for her, but they're falling for a reflection of their own spiritual gaps. And the more independent, intuitive, or unattainable the woman is, the more intense this projection becomes. She becomes, in his mind, not just a woman, but the gateway to his own forgotten soul. Have you ever felt the weight of this in a man's stare? The way he watches you, not just with attraction, but with confusion, as if he's wrestling with something far larger than the moment you're in. That's not romance. That's a spiritual obsession in disguise. And once it begins, it rarely fades without inner transformation. Most women make the mistake of softening when this happens. They try to soothe his unease. They give too much. They explain too often. But feminine power doesn't grow in explanations. It blooms in mystery. The woman who remains rooted in her own depth, who lets him wander the corridors of his own confusion, is the woman who holds the key to his spiritual addiction. He may not text you first, but he thinks of you constantly. He may pull away in cold silence, but in truth, he's trapped in a quiet battle with his own projections. He may even chase other women, but none of them will satisfy the echo you've left in his nervous system. Why? Because spiritual addiction isn't about possession, it's about transformation. He is addicted to the version of himself he thinks he can become when he's near you. But he's terrified of the death of his ego that this transformation demands. This is why so many men stay stuck in silent longing. They crave the woman who opens the door to their shadow work, but they fear the cost of walking through it. In his mind, loving you means confronting the mother wound, the ex-lover trauma, the parts of himself he buried beneath years of masculinity armor. And so he stays in limbo, spiritually addicted, emotionally distant, yet magnetically tethered to you in ways he cannot explain. The ancient Stoics whispered about this in their own way. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." But Jung knew it went deeper than suffering. It's a psychological hunger. A man will fantasize endlessly about the woman who represents his next stage of growth, not because he wants her body, but because she is the map to his own unexplored consciousness. The question is, will you become a mirror for his ego or a mirror for his soul? One will make him comfortable, the other will make him spiritually addicted. Some women think that love is about reassurance, about constant availability, about proving they are safe to love. But spiritual addiction does not grow from comfort. It grows from contrast. It is born in the space between nearness and distance, in the mysterious gaps between words, in the subtle tension of a woman who refuses to collapse into a man's expectations. If a man is spiritually addicted to you, one of the first signs is his obsession with your silence. He notices when you don't respond immediately. He feels a sudden, hollow ache when you disappear. Not because of ego-driven neediness, but because your silence forces him to hear his own thoughts. And in those thoughts, he meets his unresolved wounds. Jung taught us that projection happens when the unconscious is too overwhelming to process directly, so the man assigns it to you. He places his longing for wholeness into the shape of your body, your voice, your presence. But the moment you step back, the moment you retreat into your own world, he is left alone with the shadow, and the shadow whispers things he's not ready to hear. This is why your silence can feel louder than your words. It activates his deeper layers. It pulls back the curtain on his inner theater, exposing the fragile balance between his desire and his fear. In this space, he starts to crave not just your attention, but your approval, your validation, your spiritual permission for him to exist in the way he secretly longs to. Yet no woman should carry the responsibility of validating a man's existence. That is his journey, his burden, his initiation. Your role is not to mother him, nor to fix his emotional confusion. Your role is to remain the embodied feminine, mysterious, intuitive, and sovereign. The woman who knows her own worth does not shrink herself to soothe a man's discomfort. She lets him burn. The second sign of spiritual addiction is his fascination with your emotional complexity. He will often accuse you of being hard to read. He might say you are too mysterious or too much. But these are confessions, not criticisms. They are coded messages that reveal his inner struggle. In truth, he wants to solve you like a puzzle, to decode your silence, to dismantle your boundaries, because doing so would quiet his own restless mind. But the feminine archetype was never meant to be solved. She is meant to be experienced, respected, and encountered with humility. This is why the man who falls into spiritual addiction often oscillates between longing and withdrawal. One moment, he's intoxicated by your aura. The next, he's overwhelmed by it. He loves the way you reflect his anima, his inner feminine self, but he fears the vulnerability that reflection demands. A spiritually addicted man does not want to lose control, yet love of this magnitude always threatens to undo the ego. This is the third sign, his sudden, unexplained distance. He may disappear for days, weeks, sometimes months, not because he has stopped thinking about you, but because he cannot handle the mirror you've placed before him. When he looks at you, he sees more than beauty. He sees the woman who could unravel the walls he has spent a lifetime building. And so he retreats. He distracts himself. He might chase other women, dive into work, or numb his longing with temporary pleasures. But underneath it all, there is a haunting truth. No one else will touch his spirit the way you do. You might be tempted to reach out, to pull him back, to reassure him that you are safe and soft and non-threatening. But do you know what happens when you do this? You remove the very tension that created the addiction. You extinguish the fire of his growth and replace it with the cold comfort of predictability. And predictability never made a man obsessed. The woman who becomes unforgettable is not the woman who makes herself easy to have. She is the woman who remains deeply herself, whether he chooses to meet her in that depth or not. She lets him wrestle with his projections. She lets him face the mirror. She knows that his addiction is not truly about her. It's about his soul's demand for transformation. In this, you must understand, spiritual addiction is not romance. It is alchemy. It is the burning away of old identities. It is the collapse of his armor. And the more you try to soften this process for him, the more you rob him of his chance to evolve. The fourth sign of spiritual addiction is subtle, but it leaves echoes in every conversation, every glance, every hesitation before he speaks. It is his fixation on your boundaries. Not your physical boundaries alone, but the emotional and psychological spaces you refuse to surrender. He may not know how to name this obsession, but he feels it in his body, in his nervous system, in the way he leans in too close only to pull back at the last moment. The feminine boundary is one of the deepest spiritual triggers for a man. It reminds him of his mother's first no. It reminds him of every door that closed in his face when he was too young to understand why. Carl Jung called this the encounter with the mother archetype, not the literal mother, but the psychological imprint of feminine power. The woman who nurtures but also withdraws. The woman who comforts but also disciplines. The woman who loves but does not dissolve herself into his desires. So when you set boundaries, when you tell him no, or when you simply remain silent instead of feeding his need for reassurance, you activate an ancient memory in his psyche. A spiritual addiction isn't just about wanting someone, it's about being magnetically drawn to what you cannot control. And nothing terrifies a man more than a woman he cannot control. He may test you. He may press against your limits with passive-aggressive comments or reckless behaviors designed to provoke a reaction. He will want to know. Do you bend? Do you break? Do you betray yourself to keep him comfortable? But the woman who embodies the true feminine shadow knows better. She watches. She waits. She remains grounded in herself, letting his storm rage until it collapses under its own weight. This is where the fifth sign appears, the most dangerous and sacred of them all. It is his realization that no other woman feels like you. No other connection holds this particular mirror to his soul. He may not admit it out loud. His pride might block the words from forming. But in his private moments, in the middle of the night, when the distractions fade, he knows. He knows that you are not replaceable. This is not because of physical beauty or sexual chemistry alone. It's because you touched something he was never prepared to expose. You pulled his anima, the feminine side of his unconscious, out from the shadows and into the light. And now he can't return to the same shallow interactions he once tolerated. The taste of depth lingers in his mouth like a forbidden fruit. Spiritual addiction is not comfortable for a man. It does not soothe him. It dismantles him. It asks him to meet the parts of himself he has spent years hiding. His need for nurturing, his fear of surrender, his terror of losing control. And yet, despite the fear, he cannot let go. You see, most men are taught to chase the woman they can predict, the woman who smiles at the right time, who says yes to their timeline, who softens every edge so he doesn't feel the burn of his own reflection. But the spiritually addictive woman does the opposite. She lets him stew in the mystery. She allows him to project, withdraw, return, and spiral, all without abandoning her own center. Some women hear this and think it means they must play games. But there is no manipulation here, only truth, only authenticity. The woman who becomes spiritually addictive is not performing for male attention. She is living fully in her essence, wild, soft, fierce, intuitive, and sovereign. She listens to her own soul before she listens to his ego, and paradoxically, that is exactly what pulls him closer. Men may not speak these confessions out loud. Society has trained them to bury this level of vulnerability. But the spiritually addicted man is haunted. He may think of you when he's with someone else. He may scroll through photos he pretends he's deleted. He may hear your name in random places and feel the sting of absence, like a physical ache. Yet here's the secret. This is not your burden to fix. His spiritual longing is not yours to resolve. It is his portal to transformation, his unconscious asking for more, from life, from love, from himself. The woman who understands this remains detached, not from love itself, but from the need to be chosen. She knows she is already whole, and so she waits, not for him, but for herself to remain aligned. She lets him come or go, love or leave, spiral or evolve. Because in the end, it is not about keeping him. It is about keeping herself. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.